My name is Emma, and I'm 30 years old. I work for a manufacturing company here in Chicago, a job I landed after graduating from a prestigious university. I'm proud of my achievements and the financial stability I've built. But what's the point of financial success if it's accompanied by a constant, heavy strain on your personal life? That's my story, how I found myself supporting not just myself, but also my husband, Jake, who, at 33, still hadn't managed to hold down a stable job. Jake and I have been married for nearly 5 years. We met in college, and while we shared many dreams and ambitions, life hasn't turned out as smoothly as we had hoped. Jake had a promising start with a stable job after graduation, but things took a turn for the worse when he had a conflict with his boss. The clash wasn't entirely Jake's fault. The boss was notorious for being difficult. Still, Jake's decision to quit was a blow to our finances and to his confidence. Since then, finding and keeping a job has been a struggle for him. For the past year, Jake has been job hunting without success. He's tried various part-time jobs, but he's quick to quit whenever something doesn't meet his expectations or if he faces a minor conflict. It's as though he's searching for an escape rather than a solution. I've tried to be supportive, understanding that his past experiences might be affecting his job search, but it's wearing me thin. His unemployment is not just a financial burden, it's a strain on our marriage. The turning point came unexpectedly. Last month, Jake came to me with excitement in his eyes. "Emma, I've got big news," he said, his tone brimming with enthusiasm. "What's up?" I asked, hoping for something positive. "Well, my parents are celebrating Dad's retirement, and I've decided to take them on a trip to Italy to celebrate. I'm going to use the Freedom credit card," Jake said, mentioning the card I use for work and personal expenses. I was taken aback. "The Freedom credit card? Jake, that's not a small expense. Have you discussed this with me?" "No need to worry. It's all sorted. I've already planned the trip and booked the flights," he replied nonchalantly. My heart sank. "Jake, we've talked about our finances. You can't just use the credit card without discussing it first. And considering our current situation, this doesn't seem wise." Jake brushed off my concerns. "It's going to be a great trip. I've got it covered." Days later, I received an alarming call from the credit card company. "Hello, Mrs. Harris. We noticed some unusual activity on your Freedom credit card. It seems there's been an attempt to use it for a transaction that's been declined." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean? What transaction?" The representative explained that the card had been blocked due to suspicious activity and would soon be replaced with a new one. I realized the card Jake used was no longer valid. When Jake came home that evening, I confronted him. "Jake, I need to talk to you about the credit card. It's been blocked." Jake's face went pale. "What? That can't be right. I've already told my parents we're going on this trip. How am I supposed to pay for it?" "Exactly my point. You used my credit card without permission, and now it doesn't work. What's your plan now?" I asked, trying to keep my frustration in check. Jake looked increasingly anxious. "I don't know. I thought it would work." "That's not the issue, Jake. You've repeatedly made decisions without considering the consequences. This is just another example of how your lack of responsibility is affecting us." The next day, I received a call from Olivia, Jake's mother. "Emma, I'm so sorry about Jake's actions. He told us about the trip, but we had no idea he used your credit card without asking." "It's more than just using the credit card, Olivia," I said, feeling the weight of frustration. "Jake has been struggling with employment and making poor financial decisions. This trip was just the tipping point." Olivia sounded genuinely concerned. "We're worried about him too. We thought this trip would be a good distraction, but it seems it's caused more problems. I'll have a talk with him." As I hung up the phone, I realized that this situation wasn't just about the trip or the credit card. It was about the larger pattern of Jake's behavior. He's been avoiding responsibility for so long that it's now affecting every aspect of our lives. Later that evening, Jake came to me with a pained expression. "I know you're upset, Emma. I should have talked to you first. I just wanted to do something nice for my parents, and I thought it would be a good way to celebrate." "I understand wanting to do something special for your parents," I said, "but the way you handled it was irresponsible. We need to address this issue, not just the trip, but the underlying problem. You've been avoiding your responsibilities for too long." Jake looked at me with pleading eyes. "What are you saying, Emma?" I took a deep breath. "Jake, I think we need to talk about our future. This pattern of behavior is not sustainable. We need to find a solution before it's too late." As I spoke, I felt a sense of dread. The weight of our issues felt heavier than ever. I knew this conversation would be a turning point, but I wasn't sure how it would end. All I knew was that we were at a critical juncture in our marriage, and something had to change. After that conversation with Jake, things felt more strained than ever. It was clear that the issues between us were deeper than just a financial misstep. The trip to Italy was merely a symptom of a much larger problem: Jake's persistent irresponsibility and my growing frustration with it. Over the next few days, Jake's demeanor was subdued, and he avoided talking about the trip. I tried to keep things as normal as possible, but the tension in our home was palpable. I focused on work, hoping that immersing myself in my responsibilities would provide some relief from the stress at home. But every day, the weight of Jake's behavior felt heavier. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Jake walked in looking more anxious than usual. "Emma, we need to talk," he said, his voice shaky. I put down the spatula and nodded. "All right, what's on your mind?" "I've been thinking about what you said," Jake began, shifting nervously from one foot to the other. "Maybe I should look into getting some financial counseling or career advice. I know I haven't been handling things well." I could see the effort he was making, and part of me wanted to believe that he was finally taking responsibility. "That's a start, Jake. But it's not just about seeking help. It's about changing your approach and making a commitment to it." "I know," he said, sounding more honest. "I've also decided to cancel the trip to Italy. I spoke to my parents, and they understand the situation. I'll figure out another way to make it up to them." While I was relieved that he canceled the trip, a nagging concern remained. Jake's tendency to make promises without following through was troubling. I needed more than words. I needed to see real change. A few days later, I got a call from Olivia, Jake's mother. "Emma, I just wanted to check in and see how things are going. I heard Jake canceled the trip, and I wanted to offer my support." "Thank you, Olivia," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's been a rough few days. I'm glad Jake decided to cancel the trip, but the issues between us go beyond that. We need to address the bigger picture." "I understand," Olivia said sympathetically. "Jake has always struggled with responsibility. I'm afraid his father and I have tried to help, but it seems like he's got to find his own way." Our conversation ended on a somber note, with Olivia expressing her concern but also acknowledging that Jake needed to take more responsibility for his actions. I appreciated her support but knew that the real work lay ahead. As the days turned into weeks, Jake's behavior showed slight improvement. He started attending job interviews and sought out career counseling, as he had promised. However, old habits were hard to break. He still seemed to lack the motivation and follow-through needed to secure a stable job. One night, as we sat together in our living room, I decided to address the issue directly. "Jake, I see you're making an effort, but it feels like we're stuck in a cycle. You make promises, but then things don't change. What's really going on?" Jake sighed deeply, looking away. "I know I've let you down. I'm trying, but it's hard to stay motivated when I keep facing rejection. I feel like a failure." His confession was raw and painful. I understood the emotional toll of constant rejection, but I also knew that our situation couldn't improve without real, tangible changes. Jake, I get that it's tough, but we need more than just trying. We need a clear plan and commitment to seeing it through. I can't carry this burden alone. Jake nodded slowly, but there was a sadness in his eyes that worried me. I'll try harder, Emma. I don't want to lose you. His words were hopeful, but my doubts remained. I needed to see consistent effort and results, not just promises. The situation felt like a fragile balance, teetering on the edge of a precipice. As the weeks continued, I found myself increasingly questioning our future. I wanted to believe in Jake's potential for change, but every failed job search and half-hearted effort made it harder to stay optimistic. The strain on our marriage was taking a toll on my well-being. One evening, as I sat alone in the quiet of our apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were reaching a breaking point. I had hoped that Jake's recent attempts would lead to real change, but the ongoing pattern of disappointment was wearing me thin. I knew that a crucial decision lay ahead. The future of our marriage depended on whether Jake could truly change or if I would have to face the reality that our relationship might be beyond repair. The weight of uncertainty was almost unbearable, but I had to confront it. I needed to find a way forward, even if it meant making the hardest decision of my life. The situation came to a head sooner than I had anticipated. Despite Jake's best efforts, things were not improving as quickly as I had hoped. The financial strain continued to weigh heavily on us, and his ongoing job struggles seemed to drain the last bit of patience I had. Then, one evening, Jake came home with an excited look on his face. "Emma, I've got great news," he announced, almost breathlessly. I set down the book I was reading, bracing myself. "What's the news, Jake?" "I've decided to take my parents on a trip to Italy," he said, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "It'll be a great way to celebrate their retirement. I've already booked everything." I stared at him, stunned. "Jake, what do you mean? We haven't talked about this, and you didn't consult me. How are we even going to afford this?" Jake's expression faltered. "I used your Freedom credit card. I thought it would be a nice surprise." My heart sank. "You used my credit card without asking me? Jake, do you realize how irresponsible that is? We've been struggling with finances, and now you've committed us to an expense we can't afford." Jake's face reddened. "I just wanted to do something nice for my parents. I didn't think it would be a big deal." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's not just about the trip, Jake. It's about your repeated lack of responsibility. We've talked about this before. You can't just make decisions like this without considering the consequences." Jake's shoulders slumped. "I didn't mean to upset you. I thought I was doing something good." I shook my head, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. The issue is not just the trip. It's the pattern of behavior that's been damaging our marriage. You make decisions without consulting me, and then I'm left to deal with the fallout. Later that evening, as I sat alone in the quiet of our living room, I felt a wave of hopelessness. I had tried to be patient and supportive, but Jake's continued irresponsibility was pushing me to the edge. The situation was becoming unbearable. The next morning, Jake's mother, Olivia, called me. "Emma, I just wanted to apologize for Jake's actions. I know he shouldn't have used your credit card without asking." "Thank you, Olivia," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I appreciate your concern. But this situation has been ongoing for a long time. Jake's behavior is affecting our marriage, and I'm at a breaking point." "I understand," Olivia replied. "We've tried to help Jake, but it seems like he's got to make these changes on his own. We're here to support you both in any way we can." The conversation left me feeling more determined than ever. Jake's actions had pushed me to reconsider our future. It was clear that the pattern of irresponsibility was not something that could be easily fixed. I needed to make a decision about our marriage, and the time had come to face that reality. That evening, I sat down with Jake. "We need to talk," I began, my voice steady but firm. "I've been patient, and I've tried to support you, but your actions have made it clear that we have a serious problem. We need to address this now." Jake looked at me with a mix of worry and confusion. "What are you saying?" "I can't continue like this," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "I've reached a point where I have to consider what's best for both of us. Your repeated lack of responsibility and the strain it's putting on our marriage has reached a critical point." Jake's face fell, and I could see the realization dawning on him. He had been given countless chances, but the pattern of behavior remained unchanged. The next steps in our relationship would determine the future, but I knew that something had to give. The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air, and as I looked at Jake, I realized that the future of our marriage was now hanging in the balance. The days following our confrontation were tense and filled with uncertainty. Jake was clearly distraught by our conversation, and the weight of what had transpired began to sink in. The night after our talk, he sat in silence, his gaze fixed on the floor. The room was heavy with unspoken words, and I knew we had reached a turning point. The next morning, Jake's mother, Olivia, called me again. "Emma, I wanted to talk to you about the situation," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "Jake is devastated. He's been struggling, and I think he's finally starting to realize the impact of his actions." "I understand, Olivia," I replied, my voice tired but resolute. "But I've reached a point where I have to think about my own well-being. This isn't just about Jake anymore. It's about the life I need to lead for myself." Later that day, Jake came to me with a look of resignation. "Emma, I've been thinking about what you said. I realize I've made a mess of things, and I don't want to keep dragging you down." I could see the sincerity in his eyes, but the damage was already done. "Jake, I've given this a lot of thought. I need to focus on myself now. The stress and disappointment from your actions have taken a toll on me, and I can't continue living like this." Jake nodded, his face a mix of sadness and acceptance. "I understand. I've been given so many chances, and I haven't taken responsibility. I guess this is what I've brought on myself." It was a painful realization, but it was the right decision for both of us. The following days were a whirlwind of legal paperwork and discussions with our families. My decision to file for divorce was final, and I hoped that this step would lead to a more stable and fulfilling life for both of us. When the divorce was finalized, a wave of relief washed over me. I felt lighter, as though a great weight had been lifted. The constant stress and uncertainty were gone, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of freedom. My life was no longer overshadowed by Jake's irresponsibility, and I could focus on my own happiness and well-being. Jake, meanwhile, faced the consequences of his actions. Without the support he had been used to, he was left to navigate his own path. I hoped that this would prompt him to take the responsibility he had long avoided, but I knew that was ultimately up to him. As I moved forward, I began to rediscover the joy and freedom that had been obscured by years of stress. My career flourished, and I found comfort in the stability that had once seemed so distant. My friends and family supported me through the transition, and their encouragement helped me rebuild my life. Reflecting on the past, I realized that the end of my marriage, while painful, was also a necessary step toward a better future. The strain of financial and employment issues had taken its toll, but it also highlighted the importance of mutual support and responsibility in a relationship. In the end, the story of my marriage with Jake became a chapter of learning and growth. It taught me the value of standing up for myself and the importance of making difficult decisions for my own well-being. And though the road ahead was uncertain, I felt confident that it was leading me toward a brighter, more fulfilling future.